Okay, hello everybody. This is Here Comes the Spider Cast number 21, the podcast that reviews 1980s Spidey comics. This is your co-host, Mike L., and as always, I'm joined by
Joshua Mervell, and today we are going to be looking at Spider-Man comics from February of 1982. We're going to start off with Amazing Spider-Man number 225. Then we're going to move over to Marvel Team Up number 114. And then we're going to finish things off with The Spectacular Spider-Man number 63. Or Peter Parker, The Spectacular Spider-Man, that is.
Right. And for starters, we've got Amazing Spider-Man, which, as we've mentioned before, is the second regular issue by Roger Stern on the series. And the first thing we're going to talk about here is the cover. On the cover here is a character named the Foolkiller. Now, have you ever heard of the Foolkiller before this week?
No, and to be honest, I hope I never hear about him again.
Really? Okay. Here's the thing, Kay, is when I was younger, I came across him in the Marvel Universe, the character guide. And I always thought that maybe, sometimes comic book characters are like literary references, like Sin Eater or Ozymandias. It's a reference to some character in history. Or, so I'm thinking, what could Foolkiller be a reference to? Nothing. He just kills fools.
Yeah, he decides who he thinks are fools and then kills them. He doesn't really have much rhyme or reason,
right,
to like who he's choosing. They kind of try to give him a reason for the one death, like his professor,
right,
is not. I can't remember. Is he not giving him like the grades he wants, or he's not like?
I think so. Yeah, I can't
something
remember.
like that. Is there a reason why he kills the two guys at the beginning that are robbing the bank? I guess because they're robbing the bank. So he's like a vigilante kind of guy, but he's also killing people he just doesn't like. I don't know.
He kind of explains it a little bit later, but the thing is I got to point out, I didn't do any research. This is all from memory, but Foolkiller was created by Steve Gerber, who created Howard the Duck. Okay, but I first came across him as the head story editor and writer of the G.I. Joe animated series from the 80s. Are you familiar with that show?
Yes.
Okay, because I love it with all my heart, okay? And one of the things that made that show stand out was it sometimes had a very bizarre sense of humor, which I can only assume came from Steve Gerber, because I've read his Howard the Duck and his Man-Thing and his other stuff, and he has a very specific sense of humor, and if you don't like it, you don't like it, but if you do, you do. But it's usually satirical. It's sort of criticizing, materialism and certain parts of society and certain types of people. And so that is where the character comes from. That's where the idea comes from. However, having read the Foolkiller 10-issue miniseries, I can say that this depiction of the Foolkiller is not quite as biting and as funny and as interesting as the one by Steve Gerber, because obviously this is Roger Stern, who's a good writer in his own right, but he didn't create the character. So I think it's one of those things where, just like the problem we had with the Howard the Duck story, is that it seems like only Steve Gerber can handle the characters that he creates. Other people have a hard time with them. Yeah. So
with that context, it's a little bit more understandable why I didn't connect with this comic as much, because I have never heard of this character, and like I think even when you were telling me a little bit more of the character, I still wasn't really getting it. But once you told me his connections with Howard the Duck and his kind of like sense of humor and kind of that like twisted weird character, it kind of makes sense and is clicking now. So
let's get into this. So we got the story here, Fools Like Us, okay? And we've got, again, classic John Romita Jr. and Bob Wyasek on art. I've decided this month that I don't think Bob Wyasek's as good an inker as Jim Mooney. I really miss Jim Mooney.
No, I agree.
Yeah. But so we get kind of a typical opening for, a superhero story. We've got two guys in an alley here, and they're kind of plotting out something. But then it turns out they're actually, it turns out that they've got this letter from the Foolkiller, who's told them to meet him somewhere.
Right.
And so they're trying to figure out how to prepare for this guy. Like, I guess they're not really that scared, but they're definitely cautious. But then out of the blue, one of them gets obliterated and turned into a pile of ash, right?
Right.
And then the other one tries to get away, and then he gets zapped. He doesn't turn into a pile of ash yet. But then what happens is Foolkiller comes down and confronts him and gives him a little speech, kind of explains himself a little bit, and then he shoots him and it turns him into a pile of ash.
And then he lights the documents that they had on the Foolkiller.
Yes.
That like as like evidence on his kind of like backstory or who he was, and he burns the paper and he drops it on the pile of ash.
Right.
And the pile of ash kind of catches on fire too, which I thought it was like kind of dark, surprisingly dark for Amazing Spider-Man.
Sure.
Like not in a crazy way, but I was within the first page, somebody gets zapped and turned into ash.
Right. It's
which
almost
is
like
crazy.
he's kind of a funny version of the Punisher, but he is pretty violent.
almost.
Like he just murdered 2 people in the first 2 pages, right? So
He does kind of feel like a satire on the Punisher,
right,
for sure.
Right. Now, this is kind of interesting because now we cut back to Peter Parker at Empire State University, and we join him, TAing his class, and then we're reintroduced to the character Greg Salinger, who, as we remember, was introduced in the issue of Peter Parker, which was my first Spider-Man comic,
Right.
Peter Parker 58. So Greg Salinger is one of his students. They start chatting it up again, blah, blah, blah. And then basically he goes off. Peter goes, outside. It's nighttime, and he sees some dude climbing up a window, and he's going to go and investigate, right? And then when he ends up, trying to figure out what's going on, he kind of bursts through the window, and Foolkiller has confronted this guy, and he's about to kill him.
Right.
So this is his professor, correct?
I think it's somebody in administration because he's trying to figure out the scholarship thing.
Right.
So I don't know if this is a professor. I think it's just somebody like higher up in at the school.
Right. Okay.
But
so there's a little bit of fisticuffs here. There's actually a really good shot of Spider-Man on digital page 9 when the debris is falling on him. It's like that is a perfect. It looks like something John Romita Sr. would draw. It's perfect.
And he's like doing like a spring flip too in like the next one. Yeah, it's really fun. And then even the last panel on that page where he's on the leaning in the rubble and the sprinklers are going off in the building, and he's kind of getting drenched, and that administrator is kind of yelling at him. It's a really good panel. Yeah, it's fun.
And the thing is sorry, go ahead.
Spider-Man saved his life, and he's still like yelling at him for ruining all the paperwork.
Right. So typical Parker luck, right?
Yeah.
Now, what I love about this is that I do like the way some artists use Spider-Man's eyes to show emotion and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I gotta say, I prefer, to be honest, the way that John Romita Sr. established Spider-Man, which is just there's a very precise proportion of black and white in the eyes. There's a very precise curvature of where the white is and where the black is. And John Romita Jr. gets it exactly right. Probably because he's the son of John Romita Sr. But
probably, yeah.
Yeah, but it's just excellent here.
And it also seems like at this time, too, they were trying to stay on model for a lot of the characters throughout. Because even jumping from Amazing to Marvel Team Up to Spectacular, even though there's different artists and you get different like flavors and feels, the characters still, for the most part, look very similar, and they feel like they're the same, almost like the same artist every time. So I feel like they must have had.
It was probably planned, yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
As they went on in the 90s, that loosened up a lot. When you had like McFarlane doing one version, and then Sal Buscema, and then later other people, it was completely different.
Personally, I don't mind, because as long as the characters' like personality stays consistent, I don't mind seeing a little bit of like flavor and how different artists interpret the character and kind of adding their own flair to it. So I kind of like that, but it also is nice to have the continuity, and it definitely feels more connected this way.
Sure.
So I think that there's
agree.
definitely pros and cons for each.
Yeah, it's something to be said for it's like when you read an Archie comic, you want them all to kind of look the same, right?
Right.
That's how I feel anyway. Yeah. So then Spidey starts. He's trying to track down the Foolkiller, but Foolkiller ends up getting away in the subway. and then makes his way to a truck.
And of course he's got like a secret like facility,
hideout,
like a hideout. Yeah,
it's ridiculous, but it's so cool, right?
Right.
This super high tech thing inside the trailer. This truck. What is this called? The transport truck. Yeah.
Right. It looks like a Alpha One, or not? What's it called? Oh, of course I can't remember now. It's
From what?
From Transformers.
Oh, Optimus Prime?
No, Optimus, like their computer
Oh, you mean
on the Ark.
Teletran one?
Teletran one. Yeah.
Yes, I know this because that's what my personal desktop computer is called, Teletran one.
You know, when I was living out in Halifax, that was my router's name was Teletran.
Really?
1. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Anyway, okay, so then then we get a little bit of backstory from Foolkiller. He kind of references some of the characters we've seen in other Steve Gerber stories, like Man Thing, and is that Richard Rory? I guess he's just a supporting. Oh no, wait. So wait, I think one of these is the original Foolkiller, but I think he references him later. I don't think that's him. But anyway, flashback to him in jail, referencing Omega, which is a Steve Gerber book, Defenders, which Gerber wrote, Defenders again with Valkyrie, blah, blah, blah. A lot of backstory, which is cool. I don't mind.
Yeah.
It's kind of a trope of the day just to kind of figure out where this character's coming from. So that's kind of cool.
Right.
And then basically we rejoin Peter Parker back at the Daily Bugle, right? Doing his thing with Joe Robertson and J. Jonah Jameson.
Right.
And I don't even remember what's J. Jonah's problem this time. Is it? It's because they're kind of talk about him behind his back.
Yeah.
Nothing big, nothing specific to the story here, but it's just kind of get that in there, right?
Yeah. It's somewhat connected, but
right.
Yeah, it doesn't play a big role in the story.
No. So then we cut back to Peter, and he's in his apartment, or no, he's in Empire State University. Now this is where it gets kind of funky, is because he opens up the door and he sees Greg Salinger, and his spider sense goes off. But then when Greg Salinger looks at him, his spider sense stops tingling. Then when he walks away, it starts to tingle again. So at this point in the story, did you start to get suspicious about Greg Salinger?
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay. Because it's funny, because I don't even know if I've ever read this issue. I do own it, but I don't remember reading it. But it's just cool to see how everything connects together again, because I'm reading it all at once for the first time.
Right.
So obviously, we don't want to spoil it for anyone who hasn't read it, but there's going to be a big revelation coming soon, but we won't talk about it just yet.
Yeah. I kind of put the 2 and 2 together when he was in the hideout, because there's a lot of shots with him without his hat on, and he has that same yellow, like, curly hair. Right. So then when, like, almost like a couple pages later, his spider sense goes off. I was like, okay, yeah, it's definitely him. Yes, folks. For those of you who don't know, Greg Salinger is the Foolkiller, which I didn't know. And it's so weird because after all these years, again, that was my first Spidey comic, was Peter Parker 58. I had no idea that he ended up being the Foolkiller. But anyway. Right. So then Foolkiller returns, and he's there to kill more fools. Actually, has he explained? Has he explained why he kills the fools yet? I think it was during his like backstory when he's in his transport truck. Yeah. Yeah, he's. I think even maybe before, when he probably monologued to Spider-Man about it too. I think earlier. Well, he on page digital page. What is this? 13. He says, "But now I have the answer. Just as poetry is the highest form of self-expression, so must be my ability to perceive fools. I need merely wait for the fools to meddle with my life. By their very nature, they will seek me out so I can end their useless lives." It's so simple. It's so ridiculous. It's like, anybody who makes me mad, I'm going to kill them off. And to justify that, I'm going to just call them a fool, I guess. It's funny because I think this is actually a precursor to cancel culture, right? The type of people that we cancel now are the type of people that he would just kill because they're fools. Maybe they could update his origin and redo him nowadays. But anyway, so he's re-encountered Foolkiller because Foolkiller has come to kill more fools, right? Right. But so far he hasn't. So Spidey intervenes and stops him from killing anyone. Then Foolkiller runs away, and
Spidey comes after him, and then he breaks into his headquarters, and he's chasing him down the street. And then Foolkiller's about to kill a homeless woman, but he doesn't because she says anybody who'd go gunning for him would have to be a fool. And then he says,
Right.
"Eh? Yeah, you're right." So he puts the gun to his head. So he's about to kill himself. He's like, "Don't do this to me. You must let me kill myself. I'm a
Right.
fool." But Spider-Man stops him. He webs him up, right? And then, well, I mean, I know it's only been one issue since Denny O'Neil's gone, but we get an almost Denny O'Neil-esque ending
Oh
where...
my goodness.
Yeah, it kind of just wraps up in 4 panels and it's done.
Yeah, it really does. Like he webs him up and the comic ends on the same page.
Yeah.
It's crazy how fast this. I was surprised. Like when I flipped to the last page, I was like, "No, you're kidding!" Like
it's almost like the Captain Kirk logic, where you outsmart the computer, by convincing it that it itself is exactly the type of enemy that it's seeking out, or
right.
Whatever. It's fine. I gotta say, I'm a little disappointed, and I'm also disappointed because it's only Roger Stern's second issue of Amazing, and already it's kind of a flop issue. It's not that great. What do you think?
No, I agree. I think that there's some really great art and there's some fun ideas, but I think overall it doesn't really work for me.
Right.
Didn't have a lot of fun. I mean, I don't even think there were really any like action moments or like cool tidbits that jumped out at me that were in kind of a sucky story but elevated a little bit. Like earlier or later on, I'm sure we'll talk about it with Peter Parker, but he's fighting Molten Man and he webs his fists up so he can actually punch him.
Sure.
So there's like little tidbits like that I didn't even really find thrown in that I kind of latched onto. I thought it was just a pretty like mundane, kind of boring issue.
Right. You're totally right. And unfortunately, it kind of gets worse from here, in my opinion.
Oh,
but
boy.
Next up, we have Marvel Team Up number 114. Would you like to talk about this one?
Yeah, sure. Let me just switch over to that one.
Sure.
Yeah. So we have Spider-Man kind of teaming up with Falcon, but also kind of reluctantly teaming up with Falcon, I'd say.
Right.
And he runs into these like group of teens or kids called the Watchers, and they're kind of like this vigilante group of people that go and fight crime, and it ends up being a front for this guy who's in the mafia, or pretty much a mob boss. And once he got out of jail, he created this group to not raise suspicion, so he can do crime and have some of the Watchers go out and do this crime. And the Falcon is connected too because he's helping some of these kids in the Watchers program. So he's kind of reluctant to even have Spider-Man come and help. At the end of the day, it pretty much just ends up being a fist fight once they both find out what's going on, and it ends. Like, that's pretty much it.
Yeah. And, I mean, it's obvious that the writer J.M. DeMatteis is trying to inject some social commentary, right, with Falcon commenting that, Spider-Man doesn't belong on this end of town. I think he said something to that effect, right? And I don't know. I got to say, I think as it stands right now, my feeling is that I don't think J.M. DeMatteis and Herb Trimpe are really working on Marvel Team Up. Like, I know that they're both good in their own right, but for some reason, they're just not clicking.
Yeah.
What do you think?
No, I agree. I feel like Spider-Man maybe had a little bit more connection in this story.
Right.
I feel like Falcon maybe is kind of the one that comes in last minute, which is good because he has a reason for being there. Like, he's tied in with the Watcher. So I think that this felt more like a Spider-Man story than probably any of the other ones, but it might have been one of the weaker stories itself.
Right.
So it ended up not working. I also, like, I don't know about you, but there were also moments where some of the black characters were written.
Oh
kind
terribly.
of like
of course.
they're really bad stereotypes. especially coming from like a white dude writing it.
Sure.
So if that, I think that also maybe was a reason why I was kind of like, oh boy, let's just get this issue over with.
Right.
And kind of rushing through it, because at times it was fine. Like I could kind of get past it, and then others, like I think at one point Falcon turns to Spider-Man and calls him a honky.
Yeah.
Like it's...
or something to that effect. I don't remember. Yeah, I wish I would have written that down because I don't know what page it was on, but it was something to that effect. Yeah.
Yeah, like Falcon also says lines like, "You may not be black, but you sure are jive."
Yeah. What the hell does that
just
even
like,
mean?
are you? It's just it feels so like it's not genuine. It doesn't feel right, and I think it is because it's not written by a person of color.
Right.
I think that's, for me, one of the reasons why Miss Marvel is so well done. It's because she's a Muslim character written by a Muslim woman.
Exactly.
Right?
Absolutely.
So, there's definitely times where you can tell that it's an adult writing a kid, just like with probably any other comic. But her background and when she's talking to her family feels very authentic and real, and a lot of that dialogue really works for me. Where this, it's very uncomfortable and like glaring that it's not written by a person of color or anybody who understands that kind of culture, and it's kind of, these characters are kind of narrowed down to a stereotype rather than being characters. So
and like
that kind of sucked for me, but.
And that's the thing, is like the Amazing Spider-Man issue this week is just, a typical superhero story with a little bit of satire in there. But this is definitely trying to, like I said, be social commentary, but it doesn't really succeed, does it?
No, not at all.
Trying way too hard. One thing I do have to say, the cover's not great, but it is by Mike Zeck, so it's at least decent. What do you think of the cover?
Yeah, it's got some weird spacing, like it's laid out really weird. The perspective is completely off for me.
Well, something's wrong with Spider-Man's legs. It almost looks like maybe it was redrawn or something.
Right,
later.
And he's on the ground, I think.
No, I think Spider-Man.
Or is this supposed to be on the wall?
Yeah, he's on the wall. And Falcon's flying.
Falcon is okay, right? So they're the camera is pointed up.
Right,
through the crowd. Okay.
Right.
I guess that makes a little bit more sense. For some reason, my mind was looking at it like he was on the ground and Falcon was flying up, and they were floating on this weird thing, so it looked weird. Sure. But it's not great, but it's not. I don't know. I think still the perspective is weird. The Falcon's legs are really small and in the distance, but they look like they should be about on the same level as Spider-Man's, because they're right next to each other.
And Spider-Man's legs do not look right at all.
No,
they look like they've been redrawn by another artist.
Yeah,
I don't know if
sure.
they actually were, but something's not right here. And Mike Zeck is a really good artist, so something is amiss with this cover, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So overall, again, I don't really recommend it. I certainly don't think I'll ever reread this one again. What do you think?
No, I don't think so.
Yikes. Yeah. So another dud, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Okay, so that brings us to Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man 63. And I was really excited about this issue because it features the return of Harry Osborn and Liz Allen, who apparently haven't been seen in several years.
Right.
At least 2 years, I think.
And yeah, I think it's the same amount of time for Spider-Man as it is for us, right? As the readers, because he's definitely commented that he doesn't even know if Harry Osborn has the same phone number anymore. It's been that long, right? So, it was kind of cool catching up with them. They're married now, which is cool. We get Molten Man in this one, and it's such a weird story. I think
it starts out good and then tapers off.
Right. It's kind of this mystery, is Molten Man back? What's going on? And Peter Parker is kind of doing some investigative journalism and calling up people and trying to, figure out where this guy could be. And he shows up at Harry and Liz's house, and because they're brothers or they're cousins? No, they're stepbrother. Yeah. Molten Man is Liz's stepbrother, so he's hiding out there. And when Spider-Man shows up to ask questions, Molten Man sees him, and it causes this big fight, and they push him into a pool, I think, to defeat him, and that's the end of the story.
Yeah.
Like, it's really kind of just dies down at the end. Like,
right.
I don't know.
It's definitely not a great story. Like, basically, if you break it down, I'm trying to figure out here. So, yeah, he finds Molten Man on page 12, and then it's literally 10 pages of fighting.
Right, yeah.
It's just fighting. So it was a cool build-up, but I think they needed like an act 2. Like, if there would have been, maybe give us 5 pages of story where there's a little bit of suspense. Like, maybe Molten Man's hiding, and it's one of those things where, I'm going to invite myself in for dinner. Oh, well, we weren't expecting anyone, and have a little bit of Peter Parker kind of sneaking around trying to figure out what's going on. But instead, you just jump right in, right? And then you just start this big fight scene that lasts forever, and it's kind of dull.
Right. Or like, yeah, there had to have been something to kind of break it up.
Right.
Like, maybe have it look like he's gonna surrender, and they talk it out, but Molten Man ends up like double crossing him,
right?
Or something. Like, maybe he knows that Harry and Spider-Man know each other, so he's pretending like he's going to like reconcile with Liz, but really he's going there to get information from Harry, or to lure Spider-Man in or something. Like, I don't know. There definitely needed to be something, but
right. Yeah, kind of another rushed out story. We should comment. It's written by series regular writer Bill Mantlo, who started last month as the regular writer again.
Right.
And then it's drawn again by Greg LaRocque and inked by Jim Mooney. So Jim Mooney's still around, so that's good. So Greg LaRocque, as far as I know, the only other book he did was Legion of Superheroes. And I've always thought he's a good artist, but in this issue,
there's some kind of really plain. Bad stuff too.
Yeah,
like there's a couple of shots of Spider-Man at the beginning where his head doesn't look like it's attached properly to his body.
Like page 4, digital 4. You're right. Like that second row, that head is not attached.
What? Yeah, what's going on there? Like,
I don't know.
His head is like facing a completely different way of his body.
Right.
It's very wrong. It looks like they took his head from the last panel there and they just shoved it on
the
other one.
Well,
like, they're facing the exact same way. Like, it looks the exact same.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I know that, at least in these days, art corrections were a common thing. Like, you'd have like guys in the office like fixing art mistakes and like adjusting things like that. So maybe that's what that was they literally, and I don't want to keep using the word literally, but they copied or cut out and photocopied the head from the last panel, like you said,
right,
and just pasted it onto the one above it. You're probably right,
Yeah.
Yikes. But it's not even like, it's not even shaped properly. Like,
no,
it doesn't look right at all. But anyway.
I mean, even on page 7 too, original, so digital 8, okay. Spider-Man is swinging in the second panel, and his leg is like bent and broken in the wrong spot.
Yeah.
It's
look great.
Yeah, it's not good.
And then look at the next page. He's the freaking hunchback of Notre Dame.
Yeah.
Man,
but then you look at like the same page I was talking about, digital 8, like the last row, the first panel in the last row. That's a really good picture. Like that's a great drawing.
Those are both fine. Yeah.
So it's just weird that I some really work and then some feel very rushed.
Well, yeah, and the other issue I have is that there's a lot of really plain, dull layouts.
Yeah.
Like, especially when he gets to the house, and on digital page 13, which is original 12. You see when he bursts through the door, and then like he jumps through the living room. It's just a really pedestrian layout,
Their house is empty.
Yeah, you're like, totally right. Yeah,
there's a couch, and then like 20 feet away.
I know. You're right.
You're right. A small little TV, like so far away.
Right. It's funny because a lot of artists are like that. They can draw action, but they can't just draw regular, everyday things. And
right.
That's exactly what's going on here. It's like Greg LaRocque just. I mean, I'm sure he can, but he just didn't do it in this issue. It just looks like, a big empty living room. You're right. It's just not very well done. I don't know.
But I will say for some, like for this issue's downfalls, there are still some creative stuff. Like I mentioned before, Peter Parker really can't get any punches in because he's this literal like fire person. Like he's this molten lava mutant. So he webs up his fists and makes himself boxing gloves.
Right.
Which is really fun. And then they later on they're using like the hose in the pool to kind of
cool him off,
fight him off. And then later on, like the like even after that, some of the neighbors start coming in and spraying all their hoses at him, and then like hitting him with shovels to try to like pat down the flames. So I think that there's still some pretty clever stuff, like interesting ways to kind of deal with this character. And so instead of just having Peter Parker web him up or punch him again, it's different. It's also kind of tragic that Harry and Liz's house burns down.
Yes.
I mean, they didn't have anything inside of it, but it burned down. That's sad.
Sure. Well, also, it's always good to me when you incorporate the supporting cast. Like, I really, and we didn't even mention the fact that Flash Thompson, right?
Oh, right.
Appearance.
Yeah, that's right.
Mention that because for people that don't know, Flash Thompson was the one that bullied Peter Parker in the old Spider-Man comics in the 60s. And then I kind of didn't realize this when I was younger, but over time they became friends. And now they were like best friends, and now he's kind of lost touch with them. But Flash Thompson comes back again in the late 80s, and then he's there in the 90s. I think he's still around.
I think now he's a Venom too, right?
Oh, right. He became Venom. That's right.
He's Agent Venom, I think. Yeah.
So, I always like that. So that's definitely a plus for this story that they bring in the supporting cast.
It was also nice too, at the end, after the fire, like after the house burns down, all the neighbors kind of come together and say that they're going to support them and help them rebuild the house. So it's kind of a nice touching moment that you normally don't get in these issues because normally they just end. Right. This one does have maybe a little bit of an abrupt ending, but it's not. I think that this kind of like one panel moment cushions that blow of it being a quick ending, and then we have Spider-Man kind of. We're left with Spider-Man and his thoughts, and as he kind of walks back to New York. So,
basically we have 3 issues of Spider-Man this week that none are great.
No,
and none have weakness. Like I don't even know what my favorite one is this week. What's
I don't know. That's a really good question.
It might be spectacular, but not really by much.
No, yeah. So I think that Amazing was pretty boring, but the art I think is my favorite in that one. Yeah,
I'll agree with that for sure.
So I think that they each had some strong points and then some weaker points. So,
well, you know what? I think next week is going to really pick up. We've got a guest joining us, an old friend of mine named V. And he's going to guest on our show, help us review some Spidey comics.
Okay, awesome.
And we've got a big one next week because Amazing Spider-Man 226 reintroduces the Black Cat, who we have not seen since we started this show, right?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
I don't think we have.
No, and then Marvel Team Up number 115. Spidey teams up with Thor, so that'll be fun. And then Spectacular Spider-Man features the very first appearance of Cloak and Dagger.
Oh, that's so exciting. That'll be really fun to see that. Yeah.
All right. So, you can take it from here, Josh.
Sure. If you guys want to check us out on Spotify or iTunes, I believe that we're on Apple Podcast now.
Yeah, under Comic Book Syndicate. So make sure to look for Comic Book Syndicate, not Flea Market Fantasy or Here Comes the Spider-Cast.
Right. And you can also find us at the Comic Book Syndicate on Facebook and at Comic Syndicate on Twitter. We'd love to hear from you guys. We want to know what you guys think about the comics that we're talking about, and we also want to hear what you think about the podcast. So give us a shout out there and let us know what you think about us.
So until next Monday's very excellent special episode of Here Comes the Spider-Cast, this has been Mike L. and Joshua Mervell. See you next time.
All right, see ya.